everybody, how you doing? It's Curt Covert, and this is Smirky Inside, and I am joined today by a special guest. I'm very excited, so let me go ahead and bring him on. Hey there.
Hello. Hey, Curt.
This is Kwanchai Moriya, an award-winning, highly sought-after illustrator with over 70 books and board games to his credit, and every single one of them, by the way, has been a better product for his involvement, including our own upcoming game, The Spill. So today we have the honor of chatting with him. So please welcome our guest, Kwanchai Moriya. Welcome.
Thank you, Curt. I appreciate that. Reporting in here from sunny California, and glad to be with you.
Oh, that's terrific. So let's see. I'm just going to also now bring over our chat board because we're going to have some comments here. Already, Colin is here. So hey there, Colin. I'm sure we'll have some other people dropping in shortly. He also says welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
So this is kind of an exciting show for me because obviously, you know, we've been working together for the past couple months. But I've always been excited to work with you because I am a huge fan of your work, and this is a great opportunity for me and also our audience to kind of get to know you better and your process, and you know, all the things that kind of go into your art and making illustrations for board games. So before we get like too deep, if you would, can you just like give us a sense about your background, how you got into illustration, and actually, as I understand it, history may have been your first love, though, right? Not illustration per se, right?
Yeah. I have a history degree from University of California, Davis, and I got that before attempting to start a career in illustration and going back to school for a second bachelor's degree here in LA, in Pasadena. So yeah, history. I feel like when I say I have a history degree, clients or just regular folks think it sounds better than it is. That I'd say it definitely informs my art, but yeah. And there are projects where it's really useful, but I feel like it makes me sound smarter than I actually am. A lot of people that do history end up just using it as a pre-law degree, or I intended to go into teaching, but I wanted I something that always appealed to me, and so I was trying to go into academia. There's like I believe it's I forget they call it like a 3-2 or 3-4, where you do 3 years of history, and then you do the degree for teaching at Davis, but I didn't end up finishing that and went into art. So
well, now, so where was that pivot point? Like what got you excited enough to like change course?
I always really liked art, and but I shelved it in the interest of doing something more practical like history, which is really not practical because it's really a degree that's intended to be for something else, like a stepping stone, or you're going into academia, right? So or like a lot of students at UC Davis were just football players who needed to like be doing a degree, you know.
Yeah.
But after I got my history degree, I was like, you know what, I had a year where I was kind of waiting for some other things unrelated to my career to sort of click into place. So I had a year where I was just sort of hanging around. It was in Davis, which is in Northern California near Sacramento. And at that time, someone just introduced me to Carcassonne for the first time.
Oh.
And I was just so enamored. I really liked playing board games growing up. I always enjoyed doing art as a kid. My mom enrolled me in pastel classes at the local park district, and I always took art classes in high school. And but I just never gave it a go. So the two things, having this year off and getting into board games, led me to spend a lot of that year just really delving hard into games and making games, doing these what I called redesigns at the time, which is taking older out of print games. At the time, it was a game called Wiz War, which is still one of my favorite games.
Oh my God. That is the game that inspired me to become a board game designer. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, Wiz War, I mean, I don't love the new edition. So what really inspired me is the older
No.
editions. I went back and bought every
Yeah.
old edition I could find. I have them up on the top of my shelf back there because it just holds a really important place in my heart of just being zany in terms of gameplay, and also just the handmaidenness of the original stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it felt like someone poured their zaniness and interest and love and passion into tabletop gaming, and you know, it steeps a little bit into the that 70s 80s D&D culture. All that stuff made me want to do my own version, so I did it. I illustrated it. I made a PDF and put it onto Board Game Geek, which was you know, I was brand new to me at the time.
Yeah.
And so all these things, I did WizWar, I did a couple other redesigns. I got a lot of internet, you know, likes, and that again reinforced me to do more of it. So in that year, I started doing board game redesigns. I also was like, you know what? Let's try and get into art school and just see if we can get in. And I had a friend who was at School of Visual Arts at the time, my best friend, Young, and he was like, you should just try and get into school. And so he helped me develop a portfolio. I applied to school and I got in, and then had to have the discussion with loved ones about trying to raise the money to go to art school. And I ended up going to Art Center College of Design here in Pasadena. And yeah. And the interesting thing is that year spent doing board game redesigns, once I graduated on the other side of getting my illustration degree and was not getting any kind of work related to illustration, those redesigns were what got me my first gigs in the industry, doing Catacombs, Rumble in the House, and a couple other games that, and from there, that was the traction that allowed me to be a working artist now, which is crazy to think about.
That's amazing. I love that story, and I love the fact that it parallels so beautifully my own entree in, because that same game, Tom Jolly's WizWar, and the same, like, you know, the brown thing, you know, he cut all those cards in his garage, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Rob Simons is out there. He says that he also loves WizWar. Apparently, his favorite card ever is the Thumb of God.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
And I love just, like, you know, when you seal someone behind a wall and they're banging with their fists.
That's the best. When the player spends the entire game just trying to break down the walls that they're stuck in. It's gold.
That's wonderful. All right. Well, so that actually kind of flew me right through my first questions. You segued beautifully, but you know, for those who may not recognize a lot of your work by name, what I want to do is I want to take a look at a few, and I'm going to ask you to just feel free to kind of comment as we go, because these are all just gorgeous things. Let me just switch up our screen here for everyone. Ta-da. Okay. So here is Highrise, one of Gil Hova's designs.
Yep. Yeah. This is I really like this cover a lot. Sometimes you make something and it surprises you. Actually, oftentimes I make something and it surprises me. I don't know. I am always excited when a client is just okay with what I've done, and is just signing off on, okay, we're done with the project. Thank you very much. But sometimes you finish a project and you just feel like it's more than the sum of its parts. Not just the effort that my hand and arm put into the project, but also all the input from the designer, from the author, whoever might, my wife walking in and just looking over my shoulder. And those little pushes and pulls allowed something to come out that just feels like, more than the sum of its parts. And that's what Highrise felt like to me. It was also in a year when I was specifically gunning for trying to do really good art that didn't lean heavily on human faces or human bodies. I was when I graduated from Art Center, I basically was really good at painting people, and so I all the stuff I was doing was very figurative painted, whether it was for a client or for a gallery show. And I was so afraid to veer away from that, because I felt like a well-painted face really gets you really far as an artist, because it is something that the average person can look at and say yes or no to, you know,
Right.
as opposed
Yes.
to a landscape or something else. So I lean really heavily on that for a lot of my board game stuff. So that year, maybe it was 2018, I did Highrise, and I was like, I'm not going to put any people in the cover. Even in the earlier iterations of this cover, that I sent to Gil, I still had people in it, and then let me see if I can find it. And then I veered away from it. I also did Bousque at this time, and
right, yeah, that's coming up. But
in the Hall of the Mountain King, in the Hall of the Mountain King has trolls, but it again doesn't have people. So
doesn't have people, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I love about this one is just it's got such a great sense of atmosphere. I mean, you feel like you can kind of just walk into that scene, you know, in the foreground, you know, which is kind of hidden behind the logo.
Mhm.
There's a very kind of a tactile feel. The buildings there feel, you know, like of our world and time. And then as you progress further out, things get kind of more future feeling and you know, more, you know, aspirational, I guess.
Yeah, that was 100% Gil's idea, and the lower half of the lower half of the older buildings, I spent most of my summers at my aunt's house in New Jersey. She lived in Rutherford and a couple different areas, and so I remember walking. Like, I grew up in the Midwest in Chicago, in the suburbs of Chicago, which is very much Schaumburg and Hoffman Estates for anyone who might know where that is, and it's very cookie cutter. It's very big lawns and strip malls and that kind of a thing. But New Jersey felt like, a different place. It was a lot more. There's a mix of industrial and neighborhoods that just felt really old, buildings and houses that felt really old. So I wanted to bring that out in the lower foreground of this piece, and then Gil had the idea, definitely like push the futuristic. That way we can make it seem like something that is a city builder, but something a twist on something, you know.
Yeah. So I know sometimes you actually do typography and logos, and sometimes they're given to you. But we got a question out there that they're interested to know whether you actually did the type on this one.
No, this was Heiko Gunther.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Who is just really good. His stuff I was looking at before I became an artist, and I was just like, he was uploading Board Game Geek as well, and I was just very excited that when people are doing stuff, burning the midnight oil on board game passion projects. So, but I've worked with him over the years, maybe 2 or 3 times, and every time he just knocks it out of the park. He's got a very modern aesthetic.
Yeah, it's cool.
And I do place put the placement of the logo type somewhere, and I block it out. But if someone leans on me for graphic design, almost always it ends up being like white type on a dark surface with very little variation, because I don't have, that's not my strong suit. So if there is a graphic designer on a project, I always let them make those decisions. But I sometimes do the graphic design on smaller card games or things that require less moving parts.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about Bousque. You just mentioned it a moment ago, and I got to tell you, when I look at this cover and I walk by it on the game shelves, what a rich color palette! It's so vibrant. I mean, one of the things that impresses me like the most on this, and maybe it's something that not a lot of other people like would necessarily like gravitate to, but it's the choice of colors in the background, the far away leading up to that mountainscape. You can barely, you can't even quite see all the details, but that color choice back there just lights that whole image on fire. And talk to me about this piece.
Well, it's very kind of you to say. I am an avid backpacker, so in doing Bousque, Ben at Floodgate asked me to do Bousque. It was a really quick turnaround. He asked me at Gen Con 2018 or something. He's like, can we move forward with this? And I have a month. A lot of turnarounds are really quick in tabletop usually. And I was like, okay, let's do it, because I really, really like hiking. And this game was about, marching through the national forest and the back country. And that's something that in my bones, I know the feeling of walking through giant redwoods, giant sequoias, and seeing the way that light moves through those trees is something very specific and special.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to translate that to the page. But in translating any idea to the page, you can't translate the experience. You have to like capture a part of that and then dial it up. So it's not a photograph, but it's something more than that. And so in this case, it was making the reds and oranges so intense, not necessarily by making the oranges themselves intense, but by making a lot of the shadows very blue, making everything else dark and bluish and kind of shadowy. And in this case, like I mentioned earlier, there are humans in this, but it was the goal was, how do you make the trees the subject?
Yeah.
And I just made them as large as I possibly could in some realistic sense, and then just lit it.
Yeah.
Good.
If people can't see, let me see if I can zoom it up. Oh no, I didn't. I can't apparently zoom in this fashion. I was gonna. It's the people are like right down in this little tiny corner.
Yeah.
And out here running, but yeah, it's But you're right. It's the trees, the forest, and the atmosphere are really. That's really the core of this piece, and it's just gorgeous to look at. So
yeah, there's a lot of I've been able to learn a lot on projects as I go. I felt like my career thus far, it's been about 6 or 7 years, has been 8 years now. It's been like very run and gun, like learn and move along and then learn again and make a lot of mistakes, but have the patience of clients to let me make those mistakes and also try to do different things. And I feel like this was a big step forward for me in terms of trying something different and nailing it. When I saw it, when I finished it, it was like, oh my God, that's really cool.
Well, it's interesting. And I think, anyone who is doing creative works, I think it's always really kind of important to understand that, we're usually our harshest critics. And because it's hard for me to hear that you feel like, oh yeah, you're kind of learning as you go, and you felt like you had all these mistakes. To me, all of your work seems so accomplished, so interesting. I would not have guessed that you felt that way as you approached some of these projects.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely felt that way.
Wow. Well, that's great. Yeah. All right. So let that be a lesson to us all that, we're probably harsher on ourselves than perhaps is necessary. But now, all right, talk to me about this. This is Jiangxi, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Jiangxi. This is a cover for an RPG by Sen Fung Lim and Banana Chan. I know Sen well now from multiple conventions and working with him on, I think, 2 other game projects.
Yeah.
And
Sen and Banana are both amazing.
Yeah. I haven't yet met her in person. But through Sen, we did this project together, and they asked me to do this cover. Sen just texted me and said, do we want to do a hopping vampire thing? I'm not Chinese. I am half Thai. My mom is Thai and my dad's Japanese. And they asked me to do this game that was specifically about the time period for Chinese immigrants during right after the turn of the century, dealing with a lot of the racism and just the treatment by of Chinese families in, well, I don't know if it's specifically San Francisco, but like in many places, this was the case. And so the story is one of family trying to survive in a new country, also dealing with supernatural vampires attacking at night. And first I was like, that sounds weird, but Sen's quite a good friend. I really look up to him in this business. So I did a little bit of research, and I was like, let's just go for it. And this cover, the first thing in my mind was my dad, who is he's Japanese, and he came from Japan at age 17 and moved to New York and learned English on an AM radio, and worked as a blue collar machinist his whole life.
Wow.
And just the idea of the strength of I mean, my mom and my dad, but specifically this one was I was thinking about my dad and trying to match the feeling that I felt looking up to my dad to the feeling of survival and family fighting against like forces of evil. I know it's a very high concept.
That's great.
But
So
that was where I started.
It's interesting. Yeah. So I now personally the striking use of color and contrast in this piece, the incredible composition and the artistry, it creates this compelling narrative visually. And of course, this is an RPG, so what better way to be able to accomplish that and lead people into like question, what is this about? I have to pick it up. I have to turn it over. I have to read more, right?
Yeah.
This piece is so beautifully doing that. It's just the flow and the weave of elements, which, by the way, I think it's fair to say that it's a little bit of a style motif. I've seen you utilize this in things like Dinosaur Island and even our game, The Spill. Yeah. But it's beautifully executed, and I love how everything is kind of woven together by the dragon, and the little vignettes are playing off each other, and of course that central figure. You're just like, what is happening? And
yeah, I mean, it's partly a cheat to like layer like this. You know, it's like when I was in art school, Drew Struzan, who did all the Harrison Ford and Star Wars posters from the 80s and 90s, essentially that's his game, just like a mountain of people, faces, and small vignettes that are all composed well, because by doing so, you don't have to light the whole scene as realistically as you would have to if it was one scene. You can just cherry pick what you want. Also, you can just chop off feet, which are hard. You can chop off hands are hard. You know, you can chop off all the things you could see here. Look, none of these people have feet because that's always hard. They're not standing on anything. Perspective doesn't have to matter. You're essentially collaging things together. So of course it narratively and compositionally it's powerful, but it's also a huge cheat. To be able to just cut and paste. What I like doing this is because, yeah, sure, you can take a photograph and basically paint the photograph, right, and make something amazing looking. That's one thing, but by collaging like this, you can just take different moments and just mash them together, and the proximity of different things, like the child's face right under the chin of this like horrifying skeleton monster, like that juxtaposition is really interesting. And then the dragon I put in at the end. I knew I wanted a dragon, so I could place these elements, you know, the each figure into places, knowing that I could put in this gigantic compositional swath weaving through the whole thing. And so I saved that for the very end because I wanted it to be the brushiest and the most interesting. Yeah, but I really like this piece, and I talked to Sen a little bit about. He also really likes it. He feels like it really speaks to something, you know, deeper inside him than just board games and art. And I purposely had the father figure facing away because I whenever I'd visit my dad at his machine shop, I always remember looking at him over his shoulder while he was doing something, just like in my mind, you know, superhuman. This guy with huge muscles. I mean, now I'm taller than my dad, but so he's actually a really small guy. But you know, the feeling of seeing your dad like basically forging a path into this foreign land that he didn't grow up in just felt very close to home. So this was like this and Bousque especially, like I think the fact that I was really inspired by something really helped drive me to go further than I would have if it wasn't the case.
Yeah, well, and you know, it's funny you called, you know, some of these aspects a cheat. I feel like it's just inspired. I think this kind of composition and is just like a next level type of artistry.
Oh wow.
Just so you know, I mean, I think it comes across very different than how sometimes you may see it. Now, let's talk about this for a moment. Now, most of your works are digitally painted. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. At this point, 100% basically. I traditionally am an oil painter, and acrylic painter, mostly acrylics with mediums that allow it to push and pull to act like oils, but it dries much faster. So that's what I still have a couple of my original like acrylic paintings from before I started full-time illustrating, or as I was full-time illustrating, I did some gallery work. And I was really grateful when I did a game called Capital Lux, a card game, because that was the first time that a publisher said, we want your oil paintings in a game. Just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like, we can't pay you much, but this is like, we want to let you do whatever you want. And I went hog wild on it. And that has really elevated my work in board games, because I think it lends a very fancy air. I feel like people like, it's very like, wow, look at that, look at the paint strokes. And I think it makes people feel like it is very fancy, but I think I've anyway, I don't know. I maybe I'm again downplaying myself.
Yeah, because quite honestly, I think one of the things about your work, even though you're essentially painting on I'm assuming a tablet on your computer, the brush strokes don't feel digital. The brush strokes feel painterly. They feel like you're actually using the paint medium. Even the wisps of hair on this particular figure. Now, I know that Photoshop brushes are Photoshop brushes, but not everyone wields them the same way. And I think what you're able to achieve, there are some of your pieces that I would have absolutely guessed were actually done with a real paintbrush. So
yes, so let me correct myself. I often start a project, if it's something as painterly as this might be, with maybe 10% on a board with traditional brushes and scrapers.
Oh, you do?
Moving the paint around. Yeah. So sometimes that's the case, especially if a work is specifically the client's like, we want it to look like a painting. Then I even though I can do that completely in Photoshop, honestly, with the right brushes, as you mentioned, there is something to like starting analog, sketching something out and getting the warmth of that and translating that into Photoshop and working it back. But yeah, I think it really is finding good brushes and holding on to them for dear life and saving them in multiple places, in terms of painting digitally. It's also what I see with a lot of weak digital paintings is someone who doesn't change their brushes very much as they're working. So they're using the same brush, but changing the size, or using a nice brush, but never changing the size. So all the strokes feel the same. And with great painting, you need to really like change up the angle of your attack with the brush stroke, change the brushes themselves constantly, change the opacity, and then find things to be hard edges and things to be soft edges. So there's a lot of things I learned in actual oil painting that apply to Photoshop, that I was glad to be able to learn as I went. It wasn't something I knew when I started. And with Jiangxi and a lot of other projects around 2017, 2018, that was a time when I was really trying to transfer everything I'd learned in oil painting to the digital medium.
Cool. So, well, first of all, hey there, Holly. I see you've joined us. And by the way, anyone who's watching, if you have questions for Kwanchai, be sure to ask them, and I will convey them and get them answered. So, but before we move on to some other of your board game pieces, I did at this point, I pulled up a couple pieces from your portfolio that I think are part of your gallery works.
Sure.
So talk to me about this piece.
This is a painting of my friend Joy. All my gallery work are all, luckily, I guess I have gorgeous friends, good, like men and women who are just beautiful. And so like, I've never had to go and hire a model to be inspired to paint. And luckily a lot of my friends have just been really gracious enough to sit down with me earlier in my career and just model for free. And then eventually I started paying them. So that made it even better. But this was a show at Giant Robot in LA here on the West Side. And I forget the title of the show, but a lot of it was basically a bunch of sci-fi styled abstract paintings that were just whatever I wanted. And I did, I think, 12 pieces. This was one of them, of my friend Joy. And it was, it's just fun. I really enjoy figure painting. I like I like trying to find the light as it moves across a face. And that's what this was. I haven't seen this in a while. Yeah. This one sold. So yay.
Oh, that's cool. Now, and these are traditionally painted. These particular
traditionally painted. Yeah. On plywood boards that I make up.
Oh, neat. Let's see. We've got a couple comments in here. Justin says, brilliant work, by the way. Any brush sets you'd recommend?
Actually, the one that comes standard with Adobe CC, whatever it is now, it's pretty good. I forget the guy's name, Cody or something. I forget his name, but he was, for a while, you could buy his brushes outside of Photoshop, but now Photoshop bought all the brushes, then just standard. So I have a cobbled together. I mean, I have one brush from one set, another brush from like some free set. They're all over the place. I mainly use like an oil painted simulated brush that has a lot of, like, if the brush size is too big, the whole program just slows down when I drag it across the screen. So brushes like that, if you start covering your whole composition with that in the beginning, really lend it an air of analog, tactile feel. But yeah, my brushes are like all over the place, and you should pick and choose what you like.
Cool. All right. Well, let's see. I've got one more from your show. This I thought was just brilliant. I love the heavy brush strokes in the grasses. I love the starriness to the hair and clothing. There's just, I don't know. It's very compelling. It's a little surreal, and it's great.
This is a good piece. Well, I haven't looked at this in a while. Yeah, this is my friend Amy. She's in a lot of my paintings. If anyone looked really carefully, between this work and all my board game work, you could probably find about 5 people that are just used over and over and over again. Oh man, yeah. Amy's in a lot of my early paintings. She's a friend of mine, and she lives in Seattle now. But the secret for an amazing sci-fi painting, in my mind, is some kind of star field somewhere, a lot of intense blue, and just a beautiful friend who's looking off, gazing off into the distance to I don't know what. This is a giant painting. Actually, it's like I think it's 3 or 4 by 6. It's huge.
Wow.
And I in this show, I was really trying to add as much texture as I possibly could, so that paint is just thick. Like when I tried to varnish it, like bristles kept getting stuck in the crevices of the canyons of the paint on the thing. Yeah, that's a good piece.
Awesome. All right, so let's move on to some other board game pieces here. This is one of my personal favorites. What I love about this piece, it's such a powerful combination of two of the things that I think you do particularly well as an artist. You have not just a great illustration style, but you also have a real flair for graphic art. And when those merge, I think some of your most powerful pieces really kind of come through, at least from a board game perspective. Here you've got like the fabrics, also marking out the runway, the multiple fashions of splitting that figure in two, just everything. It tells a story, and it's just, again, it makes you want to pick up the box and flip it over and find out more. Talk to me about this piece.
Yeah. This is from the magenta period of my work. A lot of magenta. I think this year there was just, I think this is the same year as Bousque, so it's just like, how much magenta and orange can I put into a piece? This was with Portal Games, and when they asked me to do it, I was just so excited because earlier in my career, when I had done Catacombs, and all I had was Catacombs, I took Catacombs and basically put that in my portfolio alongside art school drawings, and went to Origins and Gen Con that year, 2013 or 2014, and tried to get work. And it was just like the flimsiest portfolio you could imagine. I mean, when someone looks at my portfolio and looks at a portfolio and sees art school like studies, like nude figures and like still lives, it's like, the guy just came out of art school. And not only that, but I had been out of art school for 2 years at that point and was just working side jobs because I couldn't get anything. I applied for a job at Disney, and even I applied for a job at Disney Consumer Products. I couldn't get it, so I was just working at after school programs as an art tutor here in Monrovia.
Wow.
And so I was really despondent, and I just took my portfolio and went to Gen Con and Origins. And one of the companies that I pitched everyone, and I went to Portal Games, I went to Czech Games Edition, and tried to, because Galaxy Trucker is one of my favorite games, and tried to work with them. And so all these big companies that I pitched in the beginning, and they I mean, rightfully, my portfolio was kind of thin, and they didn't give me the time of day. And so being able to work with some of those big companies now, and them coming back to me and asking to work with me because of some of the work I've already done, feels very rewarding. Feels so feels like I made it. You know, there's a progression there that's astonishing from my point of view. And so I was already enthused, and then that's always scary, because when I'm enthused about the client, that means I'm kind of on a back foot, because I'm kind of stressed out because someone's coming to me because they like the art that I've done, and then I feel nervous.
Oh, right. Okay, that makes sense.
So, and Pret-a-Porter was this like game that I'd already known about, and was this pretty dense economic game, and already had editions. So there's also the added pressure of it being something already, and you have to do better than that, or skew it in some way to make it fresh. So I just really went hard on it, and shot some shot some models, got a lot of pictures of runway shows and stuff, and just filled a mood folder to try and come up with some feeling for the piece. And I realized right away I didn't want to do something that was a scene. It had to be very abstract, and I wanted textiles in it. I wanted different patterns. I wanted like you can see here, these actual scanned in textures that I chopped and pasted in there. And I cobbled it all together. I painted something really quick, and it was like happened with the spill. I went too far ahead. I went to like 50% final and sent it to Ignatian and the guys at Portal. And then the next thing I found out, it was in their like quarterly announcements, like Twitch stream, and it was on Board Game Geek as a cover, like they thought
it was done.
I was like, oh my God, it's not even close to done. Like, there was no head on the woman. It was really sketchy and weird. The proportions were kind of off. And anyway, but they really liked it, and there was basically no feedback. I mean, there was some feedback, but essentially they were like, yeah, just go with it. So I brought it to final about another 20%, and it came out looking pretty cool. But yeah, that was a crazy project. It was it might be somewhat hoity-toity to say that I love covers and I'm good at covers, because everyone wants to be doing covers most, right? It's the thing that's the most showy. But I really slow down in projects when it comes to cards. And Pret-a-Porter has a lot of cards and a huge board. And so if anyone ever hires me or works with me in the future, just be aware that the more cards that are in your game, just watch that deadline get just bumped out farther and farther, because I slow down quick.
Well, we got Dickie out there. Hey, thanks for joining us. And Colin's got a question for you. So what is your favorite game that you did not work on? I'm guessing, I'm not sure if he meant favorite art for a game, or just like a game that you love that you would have loved to paint.
Well, I can answer both. Games that I really wanted to do that I love are Galaxy Trucker. I also really like Suburbia, and so like when they announced like the Ultimate Edition that just came out, and I bought it, it's on the shelf now. Before they had announced a new edition, I was planning to go. I've pitched Ted at Bezier Games like a couple times, and I was gonna ask him like, look, I really want, because at that point I had more street cred, so I was like, I want to do Suburbia. Suburbia is a big one for me. If they ever made another Wiz War, I would love to do a Wiz War that's like small format. You could just put in your backpack and go, like something that you could just whip out on a picnic table with really wonky, weird art. That'd be fun.
And I would print that. Yeah, so we should double team on that project.
And in terms of art that I like in games, I really like. I've had the luxury of meeting a lot of the artists that I respect and work with in this tabletop industry, so I can call them friends or acquaintances now. And Ian O'Toole is someone that I've dialogued with a lot over the years. We've shared work and work in progress, and him and a bunch of artists, like all their stuff. Whenever I see their new projects, I'm always inspired, because I feel like they are also pushing their medium each time they have a new project. It doesn't seem to be stale. It seems to be like keep reaching. So Ian's work, Beth Sobel's work, Jackie Davis, Lena and David Forrest, Mr. Cuddington, we all kind of chat and talk to each other, and all their stuff is super inspiring.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to like move to this next one, because talk about inspiring. I truly love this cover. This I just find so striking. Obviously you could have just painted a mountain, right? But the use of the diamond shape as floating vignettes to show multiple peaks, with the peak of the diamond shape coming in as an element, and then the roping, just kind of coming out as this fluid living element. I just think, man, when I saw this on the shelf, I just stopped dead in my tracks. So
yeah, this is a good cover too. I that's very kind of you to say all those things, and it's great to hear these things. As a freelance artist, I don't really get feedback that is, sometimes you find out, and I really should push more to ask clients what kind of feedback they got on the covers that we've done. But it's good to hear these things, because it's edifying. It truly is. Seven Summits, it was originally with a different company. That company stopped making games. I think it was Mayday, and they folded all their stuff up, and I was just left hanging. Like, it was even like I hadn't been paid. My second payment wasn't even paid. It was really bad. It was like a bad situation that was only made okay because essentially Daryl Andrews and I and Adrian were in the same boat. We were just like with a project without any home.
Oh man.
And Daryl, who I became good friends with over the years, I trust him to just run with it, and he ran with it and pitched it to different people and carried it through, and it managed to get published by Deepwater with Nolan and those guys, who I've also had the pleasure of becoming friends with and knowing over the years. But yeah, this project was a little bit stressful from that point of view. But just from the pure, what that meant overall was that this project had a gigantic timeline where I worked on it for like 4 months. And then there was almost, 8 months to a year where there was a giant dead space where I could just pick at it like over and over here and there for almost a year. That meant that I could really add more than I ever intended to, and had time for it to just sit and steep and then come back and fix things. Again, I like backpacking. This is mountaineering. It's very different, but the idea of exploration and adventure and seeking these peaks out, I was trying to think like the publisher wanted every summit in the cover. So like that was already in the art direction. And that's difficult because one thing that's hard as an artist is that a lot of art briefs come in and they want way too much on a cover. They want everything that's narrative in the game to be on the cover. Every creature, every race, every team. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an art brief that's like, we want all of team A facing off on the right against all of team B on the left, and they're like this. I get a lot of those, and that's one of the weakest compositions that I can think of. Two teams just like that. So anyway, I was like, maybe it's these floating ideas, like the climbers are seeking the fame and the risk, and they're all kind of floating, but the main one being Everest. So Everest is in the center. I forget which one is in the back. I think it's like, I don't know. I looked up all the different things in
that's great. And here again, you've got it's another kind of maybe personal motif for you. Many of your figures are always facing away or very obliquely to the side, which has the tendency to pull you into the scene more than if you have a face that kind of you're reacting to. So these are great, I think, for board games because they bring you into the environment and make you want to experience it more. So I think that's
it's neat. Also a cheat, Curt. I'll be honest.
No, it's not.
It means I don't have to draw a face.
Just take it.
No, it's 100% a conscious choice to have as few faces facing the camera, the viewer as possible in all my pieces. I really don't like a board game that has a person even just turned and looking at the viewer, or just some board games where there's someone's just like staring, because I just feel like it then it gives a name to the player, and then it's not like you anymore. And so I really like having characters facing away where some of the face is shaded, so there's some sense of like, I'm in this game.
Agree. Yeah. Yeah. And more edification for you. Dickie is on here and he's saying, the cover is truly stunning, and he would put that on his wall. So,
thanks, Dickie. I appreciate that. That's very kind.
All right. So we're going to get to 2 more here, and then we're going to dive in and talk a little bit about the spill.
Great.
So these 2, so it's interesting. These next pieces are much more like movie posters you'd see at the Alamo Draft House. So talk to me about what this is all about.
Yeah, so this is Fireball Island, and this was a pitch I got from Restoration Games. Gosh, I still need to get a print from them. I just
really
remind myself.
I have to get that.
Yeah, I do so many projects that I don't have. I'm not good at following up and getting copies, and usually the publisher is kind enough to offer some. But anyway, Fireball Island was a movie style poster, so the intention was the format is a poster, so make the awesomest poster you can of Fireball Island. And I got this pitch because I'd done the Galaxy Trucker poster for Board Game Geek. Chad at Board Game Geek was like, "Hey, Kwanchai, we have this idea. We're going to approach some artists, and we want to make travel style vintage retro posters based on games."
And there it is.
And I picked Galaxy Trucker, one of my favorite games. He gave me first pick. They've since done many amazing posters with all sorts of artists, but I think I was the first, Chad. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being self-important. But Galaxy Trucker. This is one of my best friends, Gina, and actually the model for the Fireball Island poster is Gina's sister, Hija. I just went all the way with my figure painting chops.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's just, let's go back to what I'm really comfortable with. It's just like abstract, thick paint, and have a person just right in the center. I have this painting somewhere. But this was basically an 80% analog painted piece, and then I brought in Photoshop and finished it up.
Yeah,
but
really cool.
It is basically a full-on painting.
Yeah, both of these are just, I think, really just great pieces. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about our work together. And so we've been working on The Spill, which is a game about saving sea life from an oil rig disaster. Oh, hey there, Susie. Welcome. Glad you could make it. You're just in time to hear us talk about The Spill now. Just to kind of set things up a little bit, Andy Kim is the designer for this game. He did this amazing prototype, which I saw out at Proto.to, where he was showing it. And I was very taken with both the table presence, the gameplay, which was tense and exciting, and the theme of, trying to avert a natural disaster. Well, it was not a natural, it's a man-made disaster, but impacting the natural world. And So I got very excited, and he had done a pretty professional prototype. He's not a graphic artist per se, but he did a really nice job on all this. And so when I started this out, I was providing direction to Kwanchai. And now the way I typically do that is I do like a page that is the overview of the game, just describing the top points, not because I want them illustrated, but because I think it's good to kind of understand what the game is about if you're going to end up painting it. And I ended all that with, let's just say it's a viscerally tense game, and it ramps up over the course of the game. And I followed that up with, all right, well, here's what I need. I've got a cover and 6 character cards and a game board and rig graphics and 6 sea life icons and an action board. And then I always like to tell people like why I came to them, what did I see in their portfolio that inspired me, that made me think like, oh, great match for this project. So, like Seven Summits, Dinosaur World, Pret-a-Porter, all of them had like this blend of realism and graphic art design that brought the narrative life. And that's what I wanted for this game. And I did a little thing about, well, the ocean and all its beauty is at risk, and that's what the players are fighting to save. And I had a couple ideas about like different images that were possible in the game, but then saying at the end, these are things that occurred to me, but honestly, in Sketch, I'm open to you getting swept up in the idea and just exploring it, because I know that if you understand like the emotional high points, the broad strokes of the game, typically an artist is going to be far better able to express that than I could if I just like told you, here's what I want in the picture, right? So, but interestingly enough, I had also had a subhead in my description, which was Disaster at Deepwell 4. And what I discovered as we started working together was that the way I was describing it and the use of that subhead was creating a much darker image than I had intended to convey. So this was our first look. And now I was waiting for a pencil sketch, and you did not stop at a pencil sketch. So talk to me about this.
Well, okay. So this in 2020 during COVID, I took up birding as a hobby. I spent way too much money on optics and photography gear. That segued into a great relationship with photography that I didn't have before, but I was very excited to draw this pelican. And I was like, you know what? I want to feature a bird on this picture that's triumphing against, oil and against big oil. And so, I mean, there is a lot of it is more than a pencil sketch, but really the only thing that I really did was paint a bird and then paint some fire in the background. But I wanted to go with the idea of disaster. That's clearly, looking at it now, which I haven't looked at it in a while, after basically finishing this project, it definitely has a very much more action-packed, tense feeling to it. Yeah. But yeah, I drew the bird and I was like, you know what, this bird's pretty good, so let's keep going. And then I framed it with some of these silhouettes that would eventually become, the stuff that's in the cover now. But the idea was to have a diagonal composition that's just like cutting hard across the cover, with a bird kind of leading that. And that's all I had at the time. That's really all it was.
And so when I first saw this, it was nothing like I expected. I mean, I thought it was a stunning visual. I actually really, really enjoyed it. But I was like, oh, wait a second, though. Like this flaming deck is like, that's risk of human life. That's like a different story that's being told here. And I was like, that's actually not part of the game. And and it was feeling a little bit dark. So we talked about it. And when you came back, we were over here. And obviously, now it was, just a little bit more blocked out as we were trying to like, find the nature of it. But even in this piece, I was like, wow, I think I have to redirect, because it still feels like a very dark time, like, and I think for this game to sell, I had my marketing hat on. I was like, I think this has got to be about hope in the end. It's, I mean, I had this title that was like Disaster at Deepwell 4, but I kind of feel like if I don't change the direction to the spirit I think people are actually having in the game, which is if I had to like, I think I threw out at you. I was like, imagine if the title was Heroes of the Sea, right? And and at that point, that's when you came back with something that made my heart sing. And it was just just a black and white, which was terrific. That's kind of where I thought we were going to start. Yeah. And now, so talk to me about how you got here, because at one point you were thinking it was probably going to be something like this, but then all of a sudden you said, "Oh, I think I painted myself in a corner," and then you came back with this.
Yeah, I just like this is the second iteration, the first iteration, I was like, okay, cool, something strong. I always, when I started cover, I'm always like, how can we make this? How can we distill what this game is about to its very essence? Like, just the empirical formula of what this game is, and then double it, double that, whatever that essence is. So I get really intense about things, and sometimes as you saw with this and with Pret-a-Porter and other games, like I'll go way too far on initial sketch just to like really hammer some idea home. And sometimes it doesn't stick, but I'd rather do that than not give my original idea a lot of breathing room. And I paint really fast. And that's in my saving grace in my career, because I just feel like I can catch up really quick, and I can take more projects than an average person would. And I can also mock up ideas much quicker painting than sketching. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. This was a better idea for me, because I was like, you know what? Heroes of the Sea, let's get some of those people looking away, big figurative people in the composition instead of just the animals. And I knew, because there's a lot of sea life, and sea life has like octopi, and the oil booms, there's a lot of shapes you can play with compositionally. I knew if I could get like 3 or 4 people in the composition and some animals, I could wrap stuff and give it motion and compositional strength, like the Jiangxi cover with the dragon. Like I knew I could get that. So this also allowed me to put more stuff in, because now that it's no longer a scene, I can put dolphins like across the woman's life vest, and birds in the sky. So just dialing it back down to what I knew I wanted it to be, which is like oil spill in the background, people in the foreground, and a lot of animals.
Yeah. And then this was the first color of, once I said, oh my God, I absolutely love it. This is where you then took it, and still kind of blocked out in a lot of areas, but man, when I saw this, I was like, oh, this is now like, all that rich color. The way you treated the oil, I thought was fascinating. I knew you were going to put some kind of a rainbow sheen on it, but it was such a vibrant expression of it. I was like, yeah, this is cool. Together with like that kind of stream of life that kind of flows up. I'm like, here's some beauty and hopefulness in this composition now coming through. So yeah, really cool.
It is really cool. It's very nice to hear these things. I mean, this project is just wrapping, so I'm still very close to it, but with someone else's eyes, I often utilize my wife to just come in and be like, just tell me what you think. And it's very good to step away from work and then come back to work and look at it again. But that's just, in the last year, that's just not something that I've been able to find enough time for, to just get another eye or get some space on a project. And this is a very good cover. It's a very nice cover. The oil does look really good. You're right.
Yeah. Now, Susie out there is saying that not only is your art great, but you're a very sweet guy, she says.
Oh, well, thank you, Susie. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Also, my friend Rob out there is saying, hey, do you prefer drawing legendary creatures like you did in Kodama versus historic creatures like dinosaurs or people and animals like in the spill? Do you have a preference for any kind of content?
I like the fantastic, like Cryptid, Kodama, these other games that you could just really but honestly, like a really good cover relies on very good reference. So even with fantastical stuff, I'm still going like for a dragon. I'm still going to like lizards and skinks and actual things to get good lighting on some of like the pores and everything. That's how you can really make something pop, is when you could see that there's very good reference somewhere built into the fantastic. And so with realistic things, it's even easier, because Google Photos and my own set of cameras can take care of 90% of what you need for good reference. And so that's and I feel like honestly, like I mentioned birding earlier, and hiking has really given me appreciation over the last decade for nature and the wild. And so I really enjoy putting that stuff into pieces. So I guess the answer is I like both a lot, but both are grounded in real animals. Really, that's cool. What makes it cover.
That's a great answer. And of course, then you came back with the final on this, and there you can see where that reference really kind of came in. So the face of the turtle, it's I think it's fascinating. Like just the way color palettes and paintbrush strokes, sometimes it infers and sometimes it's very specific. And the blend of the two here just makes for just a really artful look at the creatures and the people depicted here. One of the things, by the way, that I really appreciated, and I always showcase this to people as well, is you put this kind of concentric circle in two places in the core illustration. The other one is down here near the boat. And now I have seen that used a couple times in your pieces, but to me, I went right to the fact that that was like the board, the physical board of the game kind of coming into the game. I'm not sure if that's necessarily intentional, if that was your thought, but it's what I took away, and I thought it was beautifully done in here, and it's something that I picked up to use elsewhere in the game components.
It was intentional. I was thinking it more so from the idea of the spill becoming a wider concentric circle. I wasn't thinking specifically the board overlay, but that was the idea that there's this thing that's emanating outwards from a single source. And yeah, as you mentioned, I don't know why, but oftentimes if there's some dead space on a painting, I'm like, you know what would be really good there? Some concentric circles. And so I default there. Anyway, luckily this time there's a meaning to it that I could attach to it. But yeah, I sometimes I'll just, if there's some dead space, I'll be, what'd be good there? Like a square. I think a square would be great there. And I'll block in like a squarish brush stroke into and sometimes it works. What I don't like is when there's dead space. I mean, negative space has a purpose in any composition, but even in the negative space, you can make things interesting and visually rich. And so that's
cool. Yeah, and I truly love how this came out. I mean, I've told you before. Just to me, this now gives the sense of adventure, the sense of hope, the vitality of the animals, and of course the threat of the spill in the background. And I think that's the right note for this game, and I think it is really going to help people connect with the game and pull it out off the demo shelf, take it home, all those things. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it looks great. I was really excited by the brief. This year's been a little crazy for everyone. Yeah, but also it's just So I've been hesitant. Like a lot of pitches that come in, I have to say no to, both because I'm just been really, things outside of life have been crazy, but also I've been really picky about what projects I want to do and who I want to work with. And although we haven't worked on something before, I thought that our general discussion was very positive. And then this idea of a spill was so different from previous games that I've done, and I like doing different things and the challenge of doing something different. This is very much rooted in the natural world and a real life problem. It's not trolls attacking. It's not it's not little cute spirits inhabiting a forest. And so that initial pitch is super interesting to me, and I like taking projects that are not only different but also important, and I feel like this is a very important thing. Big oil.
Cool. Yeah, and that's how the game struck me as well, which is why we brought it on. So I want to talk a little bit about the board too. The board itself, when Andy sent it, it was functional. It needed to be a grid, concentric circles, and I had just done a not really a much better version of that for when I was playing on TTS, but and also to provide some kind of direction for you. But I really hadn't considered what it could be per se. My notes on it were very scant, and you came back with something that I thought was really pretty inspired. So I've got a couple stages of it to look at, and this was the very first thing that you brought. Now, obviously, for people who are not, used to looking at a lot of things, you're seeing like a lot of roughs here, and hopefully, it's, you're okay with me showing
Yeah, it's
roughs.
fine. Yeah.
Okay, but as you start working with artists, you're going to be looking at sometimes black and white sketches, sometimes full color roughs like this. Now, this one was a kind of like halfway through, and you're just like, yeah, let me just hold up here and let me see if take a temperature check. And it was perfect because it allowed me to take a look at some of the really interesting things you were doing. Now, the outer border of the board really could have been anything, and so here you've got it kind of anchored by coastline, and up in the here this is all sky, which is kind of interesting because it bends the world almost like on an angle here. And then the circle where we're going to be having oil drop in, we're looking down into the water, and I love the feeling of depth that you went for. So there are layers of sea life, and I think this was one of your early concepts about how to approach this, wasn't it?
Yeah, even for the cover, I was thinking like, how do we layer? Like, how do we get a coral reef into like one shot? And I was looking at I rewatched Ponyo, which a Studio Ghibli movie, which I really like.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's cool is that there in that movie there's like Devonian age prehistoric sea creatures like floating. One's here near the surface and one's even larger beneath it. Just like lurking in the depths. And so I wanted to get some of that here, and so I tried to mock up, and I used just blur effects to like knock back. Normally, I with a painting, you would render something with like thicker brush strokes a little more messily to get something to like back up into the back of the composition. But here in the board, I just used blur effects because it just made more sense.
Yeah.
And
I think to good effect here.
Yeah. And this was an earlier stage. So I just wanted to get like half of it sort of rendered out the way I thought and get a real depth of like layers of sea life. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, we can move ahead in time and just quickly get a next snapshot. So here is the final artwork for it before all the graphics go on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely like, I want to do projects each time that are different from the last thing. And if I can just copy paste a previous board and put it onto a new, completely different project, that I feel like I've failed,
Yeah.
And so this game needs to be about an oil spill. And of course there's oil in the middle of the board. There's going to be an oil rig, but I want it to look like if someone's walking past this game, it needs to look like what it is. And that's why that central ring, that middle ring of sea life was so important to me. And there will be a lot of copy that goes over this graphic design, but yeah, I just wanted to see what we were doing. And it could have easily just been like an ocean and you just put, graphic over it. And
right.
But yeah, I just wanted to get that. So that's kind of what we were going for here.
Yeah, and that's why I came to you. And of course, a lot of stuff does go on. Obviously, there are things that actually make the board game work. So here then is the composed piece where I've added all the different icons and things that help guide you put what needs to go where. But you can still see so much of the richness of that detail is now it still comes through and really shines. And I added just a little bit of a green to the grid.
Yeah, that looks great.
Almost so it's almost a little bit radar-y, but it also it's kicked back just a little bit. If it was bright white, which it was originally, it took too much away. It distracted the eye too much from the background. And it's almost like you're looking through glass down through the water now. So this is great. I even took the logo and I let the clouds. You did such a beautiful job on the clouds.
Oh, yeah.
I let the clouds roll right over the logo a little bit. So I thought that was kind of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah. But really just delighted with how this came out. And now the oil itself, I mean, there have been lots of ways you could have handled the oil. It could have been just a black and brown mass. But you've got something that feels ominous, feels alien. And when it's interesting, sometimes things look a little different on a screen than they do when you print them out. And I actually had to go in and print this out to see how it would come across. Some of the nuances of this are going to be, they're going to be a little bit lost in the oil,
Yep.
because people will still basically see a dark mass. It won't look quite as science fictiony. It's going to look more like oil, quite honestly, when it's printed. But I just thought, it's a really interesting and compelling way to to do oil.
I think we talked. I think I mentioned way early on when we were just in early talks about this oil and to give it some personality. I mean, to personify it in some way, even if it didn't translate into anything art wise or anything into the actual game. I wanted to I wanted to give it this like ominous feel. So like if you look at shots of oil spills, it just looks like brown. Like dark water. There's not a lot of like the
there's not much to
sheen. But I wanted to give it personality. Even in the beginning, I was thinking even to like put faces and skeletons like just like abstractly into the shapes. When I was a kid, one of the movies we had on VHS, one of the few movies we had VHS was Fern Gully, and Fern Gully.
Yes.
With,
sure.
Robin Williams voiced the Bat, and the main antagonist in that movie is an oil pollution monster that seeps out of a giant like tree cutting machine. And he sings some song, and it was like one of 3 VHSs we had as children, because I think we like rented them from the library and ruined them, so we had to buy them.
That's
so
funny.
We had Fern Gully, Pocahontas, and like Lion King, and we watched them over and over again. So I wanted to personify it in sort of in that mode of like this. Like the oil has a menacing feel. So
that's cool. All right. Now we got just a couple more things I want to show everybody. So now this is not probably the most interesting thing to look at, but I'm doing so just to kind of show what kind of goes into collaborating, and what kind of art is sometimes needed. And it's not usually, the art that is going to get the most notice in a game, but you would notice if it was missing. Now, this is something that I basically threw together. This was my prototype version of the situation board. It's not that interesting to look at, and I knew I wanted just a couple accent pieces, which you very kindly did. And so just a background of kind of a sea wash, and then a little vignette of the coral reef, and a place to put oil dice when you got them removed, and you've got 2 kind of different ships kind of tending this containment area for oil, which is terrific. Which now when I come back with additional graphic elements, which I've taken a little bit more time with, it actually makes something that looks like, oh, this looks like fun. Do I get little cubes when I complete a thing? Yes, I do. And they're just little flourishes. But now that artwork that you've provided really creates something that feels like a finished product, and that is as important as anything else. So just wanted to showcase that. The other thing too is these pieces have other uses, and as if anyone is thinking about publishing and working with an artist, you don't necessarily have to have a piece of art done for every single thing that you do. Now, normally what I do is very often artists who are working digitally will keep most of their layers, which means that they can be, pulled apart and repurposed. Now, Kwanchai, you don't typically do that. Talk to me about why you don't do that.
So I'm not going to name any names, but I've had a few projects that I sent. I mean, sometimes the contract will specifically say we want all layers live, but rarely it does say that. And for 2 reasons, I flatten my layers, which means for those who don't use Photoshop, you might draw a human here, and then there's like a tortoise here, a turtle here, and then they're actually on 2 separate layers that can be like turned on and off and altered without touching anything else. Yeah. And what mostly people do is you leave all these layers live all the way till the very end of the project. So you could literally tweak and change colors, delete things all the way, even on the final product. But what I like to do now is flatten as I go. Usually in the last 10% of the project, I start merging layers and then just saving a new file where those layers are flat. And that does 2 things. One, it makes me commit to a composition.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I see that's really weak in digital paintings that is often the case in like newer artists or younger artists who haven't gotten their feet under them yet is that they what's called, maybe you've heard of it, like noodling. They noodle too much. They just noodle on little things forever. And the cover might be about that big, but on the actual doc, you can zoom in and see like little child's faces when you don't need to see that. You don't need a noodle, and you need to commit and make larger strokes to give the composition power.
Yeah.
The second thing that flattening layers does is that it doesn't let the publisher severely alter your painting. So I've had some past projects where I sent in my final, and I mean, it's fully within their right to do so, but gigantic swaths of the composition were changed completely, deleted, changed colors, and it's really upsetting because I might spend hours on just what might be a few millimeters of movement on a composition, and then someone that wasn't part of that project, that's part of the graphic design team, might take those live layers and just go willy-nilly on there. And again, it's within their right to make a product that they think will work the best, but it's upsetting when that process is taken out of my hands. And so what I've done now, not because I'm trying to antagonize anyone, but I'd like to preserve most of the functionality of my final product. So what you see here is a flattened foreground, because I know this needs to be this way. And then the background is a separate layer so that there's still some ability to push and pull. And usually I can go back to old layers and take things as necessary for like little things like cards and rulebook stuff. But I don't I flatten my layers. I'm sorry, everybody.
Oh, no. No, it was
sorry,
more,
all my clients.
it was more offered as a discussion point. And I thought was really interesting that part of your process to flatten those and make the composition whole, so they're not in the end separate pieces that are layered, but they're flowing all together. Obviously, if you're actually painting a canvas, you wouldn't be able to do that either. And so I think there's something to be said, especially with the way that you work and the way those brushes overlap and move into different areas. It kind of needs to be that way.
I think so. Yeah, I think a lot of I worked with a lot of small companies, and still do work with a lot of small companies that are often like a one-man or two-man show, man or woman show, and so a lot of times those small companies have a lot of passion, but don't necessarily have the experience of working with artists. Yeah, and so that's a language that needs to be learned on both sides of that relationship as we go. You have had lots of experience as an art director, but I've worked with many companies that I'm often talking to someone who has almost no experience. And so someone with no experience in art and that wants to make a cover is thinking in terms of content. They're thinking of what needs to go on the cover narratively. So we need person X, object B, and doing thing C, right? But as an artist, what has to be the first and foremost is composition, period. Yeah. So like the objects almost don't even matter. It's almost a secondary or tertiary of importance, because what has to be nailed is something visually arresting. And then you can almost put anything in there. I mean, that's not what I do, but I think it's such an interesting thing to have to learn that language with folks who don't have a lot of experience, trying to explain to them like, yes, I could add person, X, but then what you really want from me as an artist is to make a composition that's just like, oh my God, what is in that box? Not like, oh, I understand person X is digging a hole. You know what I mean? Right. Like, so it's so that's why I like to commit to layers, because what's doing it's putting the composition first. Yeah, in my mind.
Well, and so on the other side, from the publishing angle, one of the things I was like, oh no, because I had planned, rather than commissioning separate pieces, sometimes I will isolate pieces of artwork to bring into other elements. So, for example, here is now the resource card, and I knew it wasn't going to just be a square up of the cover, but I wanted it to be very much inspired by the cover, but it wasn't going to work in that format. So I went to go find that background. And one of the things you'll notice is this is not your final background, because when you sent me the assets, they're actually, I think, one iteration previous. But it's okay because now the resource card itself has a little bit its own quality. And then I took a bit of the oil spill actually from this piece and I played with it here. Now, unlike perhaps some of our other clients, I also sent all those things to you and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And if there's anything that you think you would want to modify or change, let me know.
Yeah, that's all I ask for, really. Like as an artist, I think artists need to be treated like Pomeranians, you know, just like a little bit fussy, and you just gotta be a little bit nice to them, and then they'll be like loyal and
well,
and happy.
And I see it as partners in a creative effort. And that's really the way that I would typify it. But again, you can see how I was able to repurpose this little vignette from, you know, the board, which was not going to be a super important element per se visually. And now that beautiful piece of art, which largely gets hidden by all the icons, is now used beautifully on the face of this card. And again, I've used some of that oil kind of hanging, you know, floating above the reef to just bring this card to life. Much like I was able to do with this, again, just by isolating a different portion and really blowing it up, the tonality changes because all those dark hues are now just outside of frame. And so the wind condition seems a little bit brighter. And you tighten in a little bit closer. And here I actually pulled in a bit of the sky from the other cover. And now it's, you know, yes, here's how you can win. And again, I brought some of those circles. I loved the concentric circles. And so I used them as a motif throughout. So
that's great.
And of course, these are, of course, all the characters. You know, we've got a bunch of specialists during the game that you're, you know, you've got access to 4 during the game. So they all have different roles. And so we see them, you know, busily at work, you know, trying to stave off disaster. So I haven't actually done the layouts for these, other I'd show the actual cards, but still works in progress. But in any case, so we're way over time. But let me just ask you, how much, I had a whole bunch of other questions for you too, but
please.
When you are given a project and the publishers are trying to express, you know, what they're looking for, you know, whether they're specific or whether they're fairly loose, what are you really listening for in those descriptions that truly inspire the work? I mean, I think you touched on this a little bit, but
to be honest, as soon as I get a brief in, I already have an idea of what I want to do. If I'm saying yes to a project, I have an idea in my head of what I want. I know it might be one thing. It might be like with Prêt-à-Porter, it's like, I just know I want to put some fabric on the cover. It might be something as small and not, you know, secondary as that, but it might be something as big as like, I want this cover to look like this. And so part of being a good artist is like patiently listening to the brief that comes in, but also holding fast to this, whatever, you know, little ember is burning already for the idea, for the concept. So I guess the answer is I'm not really listening completely to the brief that comes in. But I think with every good project, there's already some kernel of an idea that's burning. And if there isn't one there, I often don't take a project because I just don't feel like I have a thing special to offer it.
Got it. Yeah. And
I'm really privileged to be able to say no to projects now, which was not always the case. So I can be pickier and not just take anything that folks are you know, generous enough to offer.
That's cool. So what advice do you have for artists who are either starting out, who are looking to do board games, or just anything that you've got for them?
Yeah, I have 4 or 5 specific things that I offer to artists who are asking for help. I was that artist also, and not even, I mean, not even that long ago. Like recently, I was that artist. I mean, it was only like 4 or 5 years ago where I could like fully commit to a full freelance career. No, it's longer than that now, but it just feels like I'm still starting out, is what I'm saying. So my advice, please take it with a grain of salt, because I am learning just as much as anyone else as I go along. But I think 5 things. So the first thing is make a 5-year plan, because a freelance career is this long strung out thing that takes a couple of points to build on each other. Moments, opportunities need to build off of the other to make the connections you need to learn about your own skill set well enough that you can perform at a level that's full-time or close to full-time. So a 5-year plan is important, because it's really easy to feel like you're falling behind and that things should happen organically, but it just doesn't. And you need to make a plan of how you're going to spend your money and your time to effectively get to a point where you want to be. And you can't just wait for things to fall from the sky, because I did, and a lot of people do, especially if you went to art school and you spent that money, and there is nothing that's falling out of the sky into your lap, really. There really isn't. So you need to really put your nose to the grindstone on that. The second point is, once you've made a 5-year plan, as you're going into your 5-year plan, there should be a point where you switch and go full-time, where you switch and make the big bucks investment into that Cintiq tablet, into a new computer, into plane tickets to a convention, where it's no longer kind of part-time, but it's like, I'm really going and I'm really spending the money to make this thing happen. I think a lot of artists have part-time jobs as you're getting started. I did. I have so many part-time jobs that I feel like I can easily jump into conversations, because I've had so many crazy part-time jobs, grocery bagger, Chinese after-school program tutor, where I that was what I was doing when I went full-time. I was working 2 separate Chinese. There's a lot of Chinese after-school programs around the area, because there's a big Chinese community here. So there's a wealth of those opportunities to have. But at some point, you go the whole hog, or whatever they say. Drop the side jobs, get the equipment. The third point is go to where the warm bodies are. That's what I always tell people. Like, there's somewhere where there's people actually shaking hands and talking, and doing deals. And for board games, that's board game conventions. That's prototype conventions like Proto-TO, Unpub. There's people that are the movers and shakers. And in tabletop, luckily, it's still like a very like mom and pop shop.
You're right. It's a very open community.
Yep, a lot of good folks trying to get things done, coming from other industries, a range of people trying to make board games because they love them. And it's not yet this thing that's corporatized, where a CEO is not someone who plays board games. Like, the owners are the players. So go to where the warm bodies are. The fourth point is, the last 2 points are more about the actual art, which is that design with value and contrast in mind. So it's really important to make something that pops, even if your art naturally in your own style isn't something that has a lot of contrast. If you're designing for tabletop, you need to design a cover that can sell products. And for that to happen, it needs to have good contrast in the right places.
Yeah.
So your color might be great, your line work might be great, your character and your concept art might be great, but you better have contrast on a box cover, otherwise you won't get hired.
Yeah.
And the last thing is similar to that, is design with the client in mind, meaning when you're doing your art, design something that is specifically going to tabletop. Like, you might come from a different industry, or you might be coming from art school, but you need to think in the mind of a board game publisher. They have deadlines. They have other products maybe that they're releasing that year. How do you make something that stands out from them? Don't just make stuff that is like assets that might be great in a video game, because they need to take those transparencies and overlay them on something else, but design with a board, with a cover. One thing I tell new artists often that want to get into tabletop is to take a game like I did, take Wiz War and do your own version. Show that your skills translate directly into a tabletop experience. And that's so much more effective than, figure drawings or different images of a fantasy axe. Yeah. I often see when I walk around at conventions, other people now pitching, and I'm blessed to not have to be able to pitch anymore. Like, projects just come in magically now. But
Yeah.
I can see other people doing the same thing, and a lot of those portfolios are full of concept art dwarves and elves with arrows and axes standing on a gray background. And those are great for video games and movies where you're concepting out. And a lot of the entertainment arts programs at colleges and art colleges have those sort of that sort of push to do turnarounds and concept art. And that's more towards the entertainment studio business. If you're doing tabletop, you need to make stuff that fits and is directed towards tabletop.
That's great. That's really great advice. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey there, Susie and Rick. So Susie, she loves, Susie Dancer says she loves the logo you did for her.
Oh, this Susie. I know Susie.
Yep. And she says she gets compliments on it all the time. And Rick is a big fan. He really loves Overlight and the work you did on that.
Thank you.
So let's see. The only other question I've got for you is, for those who are designers, who are thinking about Kickstarters, who are established publishers, what advice would you give publishers about working with artists?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me be careful here.
No. You should put gloves off. I mean,
the first thing that comes to mind, which is probably the last point I should make, is that publishers need to send the products that you work on with your artist to the artist after you're done. Otherwise, it feels like you went on a date and you were never called again. Like you had a great date, but then there was no like follow-up. And as an artist and working tabletop, one of the benefits is the tactile nature of the final product. I can literally hold it in my hand and appreciate it. So that's one point that's not really important, but it is important, of course.
But is, yeah.
Please send. Please don't have to wait for your artist to beg you to send them a copy of the thing that they poured their heart into. That's the point. Secondly, I think that in art school, I feel like we were taught a lot to be wary of contracts, of publishers, of being scammed or being tricked into a situation where you were being taken from as an artist. But I feel like I'm mostly the one that's been the problem. Like the other way around, I'm the one that needs to be more communicative, more on time, more punctual. That's been a real struggle of mine. So what I would say is a very valuable thing from the art directors I've worked with, the publishers I've worked with, is a lot of communication, because I think most artists I know are not great at emails. They're not great at talking to people that aren't their buds and their best friends. So I've seen a lot of my friends fail at being freelancers because it requires the artist to be not just a good artist, but a good communicator, and a good small businessman, which is really hard, managing time and resources and spending a good 30% of my day just emailing back things that I might not even be committed to. So I think it's really important for the point man on a project on the publisher side to be not just patient, but really good at communicating exactly the tempo and the tension that they're feeling on their side in terms of deadlines, and communicating them to the artist so the artist feels like they're part of the process and not just like a hand, an appendage waving out on the outside. That's all I can really say. I've done my best to put myself into publisher shoes as much as possible, because I feel like that makes me a better artist, a freelance artist, and communication is so key.
Yeah, and honestly, from the other side too, I can say my history as a graphic artist, as a creative director, has informed how I work with artists, because I know what it's like to have to take art direction from a client, and I know the importance of deadlines, but also what happens when things come up. And you're right, communication is so important, and also making sure that the spirit of that communication is still always positive no matter what is going on, and that is that's relationship building, and that's something anyone should do in any business.
And I think that all artists coming into their profession are somewhat of a wild stallion that needs to be broken to find their true gait, you know?
Yeah.
And so, like any artist, I'm sure I came out of art school and I had this vision for every project that if it was stepped on by the client, I just felt like, you don't know what you need. And that's a very childish approach to business in general, to collaboration. And so I think every artist is on some range of being broken. Not broken. Broken is a bad word, but you understand what I mean. Like being learning how to collaborate well and communicate well over a increasingly digital freelance medium, you know, that consists of not even phone calls, but literally just text on a screen. So I would encourage all art directors to be patient in that process and know that artist is somewhere in that range, and eventually they'll get to the point where they're much more. They learn that a truly great project comes out of many different hands, essentially.
Yeah. Great. Hey, Kwanchai, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. I'm sorry it went long, but it was a great
pleasure.
Conversation.
It was great. Yeah.
Yep. And again, it's been a pleasure working with you. So thank you so much for all your work on The Spill. I will actually send you a copy, so have no fear.
Yeah, and it'll be great to meet Andy someday, hopefully. Yourself and Andy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In person, yeah.
And I'm just going to throw this up too. If people want to get a hold of you, this is the best place to do it, correct?
Yeah, I'm also I think I'm on Twitter and Instagram. There's only one Kwanchai Moriya in the world as far as I know. So I'm very easy to find on every platform, and feel free to follow me there too.
Perfect. All right. Well, hey, everybody, thanks so much for joining us again this week. We'll be back next week. I don't know what the topic is yet because I'm still making it up. But again, you go ahead and like on whatever thing you are watching us on, and hopefully you'll join us next time. Kwanchai, again, thanks so much for being here, and thank you all for watching.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so long, everybody.